Welcome to the Human Longevity Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Peterson. Together, we're about to explore the science and solutions that will help you live better, longer. In today's episode, we are going to explore the missing link to longevity and how centenarian consciousness, emotions, and meaning affect the rate and pace of aging. So get ready as we sit down with internationally renowned longevity expert and best-selling author of The Mind-Body Code, Dr. Mario Martinez. We are going to understand the default mode network and how to truly upgrade our own potential to live our longest, healthiest, and most fulfilling life starting today. Now, as we get ready to dive into today's episode, I want to invite you to go over to humanlongevity.com/podcast. There you can enjoy all the gifts from our show's sponsor and be sure to grab your free age reversal starter course. Now let's get into today's show. Oh, Dr. Mario Martinez, you know I love our time together. It's so incredible to have you back here with us on the Human Longevity Podcast. And we are going to dive in today. Everybody wants to know what the missing link in longevity is. You have an amazing, long-standing career. You've been all around the globe. You've seen the best of the best, the worst of the worst. You've talked to the longest living humans, and you've really kind of boiled it down to the missing link. And that's what we're going to unpack today. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And
So,
congratulations for your great work, by the way.
Thank you. You're incredible. Like, listen, you guys, this is a love fest. This is my mentor. This is my dear friend. And it's always a joy when I get to sit down and have a conversation. I always learn from you. I always do. And I'm never, his book is never too far away. You guys, if you can see it, it's the Mind-Body Code. So some of the information that we'll talk about today is inside of that book. If you guys don't have it, you want to go get it. And, but we're going to also learn some of the more recent research and insights and discoveries that Dr. Martinez has come across as well. So, Doc, the missing link, let's just go ahead and give everybody who hasn't got to hear from you before a little context. So let's kind of go back because you have been all around the globe. You are known for your work with Centenarian. So where did you start versus where we're going to dive into today that you realize that we've really kind of missed the mark on some things in this longevity conversation?
Okay, really quickly to bring it together. When I started looking at centenarians, I wanted to know, the reason I wanted to look at them is in science, you have to look at what works. So what works is people who have actually lived a long life healthy. Their biological age is really good and their lifespan is really good. The health span is very good. So I started with that, but as a neuropsychologist, I thought it was going to be the genes. Now they talk about the Methuselah gene and the telomeres, and that's very interesting, but it's nothing related to that. 20% at most in my work and people from the Pearls, Blue Zone, everybody, they pretty much say that it's about 20%. So the rest is what they do. And what I ask myself is, okay, so if it's not that, what is it that they're doing? And I started with diet. I started looking at the theories that if they live by the base of the mountains, there are a lot of minerals, all kinds of things, and none of that worked because in Sardinia they eat rice and fish, and in Costa Rica they eat rice and beans and meat. So it's not the diet. Of course, most of them eat less than they need to. They're not obese and they're not drug addicts, no question. They're vegan. There are very few vegans, by the way. There are many vegetarians, but very few vegans. There are people who eat meat, but the difference is that if they're a vegan and you invite them over for a barbecue, they'll eat the barbecue. They're flexible. Flexibility is important for longevity. So then, as an anthropologist, I first started as an anthropologist, and I said, okay, let me go into the neuropsychologist. The anthropologist goes in and doesn't mess up the culture, just goes in and immerses himself in the culture. And then I started finding that there were particular things that they did independent of the culture, like what Ruth Benedict called the patterns of culture, are the things that we do, the mores, and what they do is they go out of that, and they're outliers. So finally, to not get people tired of this, I found 4 factors that have to do with your perception of the world and 4 factors that have to do with your emotions related to the world. And those factors have to do with your perception of time, your perception of aging, your perception of health, and your perception of self-valuation, which is really important. And on the emotions, they're salient on gratitude and generosity and curiosity and admiration. So then the great finding was that all of these 8 factors are anti-inflammatory and anti-stress. And that's why they live so long.
Uh-huh.
So that's the missing link is you have to bring in to all these other things, the food and the diets and everything else, their meaning making, which is a default mode of the brain. The meaning making when you're not paying attention. We want to change default mode. So if you give people all kinds of techniques and all kinds of things to do, and they don't change the meaning maker, that's not going to have sustainability.
Okay. So you just literally gave us all the gold, all the gold. And I want to, first of all, I want to thank you. I want to unpack some of the profound things that you just said. So we're going to work backwards. So you just opened up this idea of the default mode network. So you started your career kind of going, okay, what is it? Right? Is it where they live? Is it what they're eating? Is it how they're sleeping? Is it how they're moving? Is it? And interestingly enough, of course, we know that lifestyle, the way that we live, does matter. You said, hey, only 20% of it's in the genes, which means about 80% is what how we're living, where we're living, with whom we're living, the meaning, and we're going to come to the meaning maker in a moment, the meaning that we're giving it all. It's really what we'll bundle into a simple term of kind of going that lifestyle and our environmental experience is what's really contributing that 80%. And so while we know unequivocally from the research that just if we get up and move, we get 7,500 steps in a week, we're going to already extend our lifespan easily by upwards of 7 years, if not longer. We know that if we just restrict our calories by as little as 300 a week, like a 300 a day, instead of eating 2,500 a day, we're eating 2,200 a day. We know we're going to add anywhere from 3 to 5 years to our lifespan, right? We know that there are certain principles of just lifestyle that work, to your point. Yet, if that works, why are we not living healthfully and well? And what you just talked about is there's something deeper, right? It's okay, yeah, we can do the things. We can eat 300 calories less, we can move more, but what is the meaning that we're giving it? What's
The
the
meaning
meaning
maker.
that we're giving
Yeah.
exercise? What's the meaning we're giving food? Because if we think food's bad, it's having a stress response in our body, right? And so you have discovered that it's the meaning we give things, and specifically the default mode network. I want you to explain that, you did by giving it the meaning maker, but explain the default mode network and explain why it is so challenging for people. We all know we should do the lifestyle things, but we don't do the lifestyle things. And
Right.
it's a default mode network issue, right? So take us into
Yes.
what it is and why we know the things that work, but we're not really doing them. And so we're not really having profound shifts, even though it should be really simple to do so. If 80% of what we do impacts our DNA and our ability to live healthy, talk default mode network. And then let's dive into these 8 variables that you discovered.
Okay. Well, to your point about why it's not working, let's say the United States, the lifespan is not moving as quickly as it should, and in some cases, it's going down. Yet the fastest segment of the population, the fastest growing segment, centenarians. In Cuba, the lifespan has gone down. Centenarians are increasing. So these are people that have access to some information that do things differently. And I think the default mode, here's what it is. Marcus Rachel in 2001 was doing some experiments with functional MRIs, which actually you can see the brain, how the brain is working, and where the activity is going. So he started having people focus on things outside. Take a look at that, mathematical, so think outside. And everything was working. Then he said, okay, now just start daydreaming and start planning. And some things started turning off. This turned off, that turned off, till there was a part that some things stayed on. And he called it the default mode network. And at that time, they thought, well, it's just the pilot driver that we have. You notice when you're driving, you're not paying attention, and you get there. So how did I do that? That's the default mode. Well, it's a lot more than that. the default mode of the brain, which is some areas precuneus and all that doesn't matter, uh, have to do with autobiographical memory, episodic memory, meaning making out of sounds, and future planning. Everything that's important. So that's there, and meditation turns it off, ayahuasca turns it off, yoga turns it off, but it comes right back on. So most of the things that need to be changed, we're going to be changing the default mode. And the way it works is based on habit and context. So I'll give you an example. I work out 5 days a week, and I go to this place at the Y, and I go there 5 days a week. Then about half a mile further, there's a place where I go and recycle on Saturdays. Okay, so I'm driving Saturday, and I'm thinking about this and that, and all of a sudden I see myself driving into the Y. What am I doing? It's like, oh, this is great. My default mode. That's amazing. That's how it works. So
Yeah.
now, and this will be like therapy. When I go by, I say to myself, okay, Saturday, how can I change my default mode? And the way you change the default mode is with curiosity. The way that you come into mindfulness, Ellen Langer's independently came up with the same description. Ellen Langer at Harvard. We're going to be doing some research together, and I believe that it's not going into meditation and going to a cave. That's one type of mindfulness. The type of mindfulness is a curiosity of being able to detect novelty, and that's what the default mode does. Meaning making out a sound and curiosity. So if I were to really want to work on default mode, I would say, okay, today is Saturday. What's curious about Saturday? Okay, I see less cars, whatever. What's curious about Saturday is what begins to change my default mode habit of Saturday. Then I don't go, and even when I'm musing, I don't go into that place anymore because I have a different place now. That is the recycling place. And there are many, many more techniques that we developed, but that's one of them. So the language is the language of curiosity. And what happens, what you were saying, is that you do all these things and you're eating well, but you go for a walk, for example, and you do your walk and you're doing everything, and it's more routine rather than ritual. But all of that time, you're not really feeling good about yourself. You don't feel like a good person. All of that is going to be diminished significantly because you're doing it. I'm doing it, but who's going to get me today? You go to the forest, like I go for walks every day. This forest is really beautiful, and you hear people. They look like ambulatory schizophrenics talking to themselves. They're talking on their phones. That's not what you do. That's not what. And why? Because they can't turn off and go into whatever they're doing in the present, in the mindfulness.
And I first of all, I think it's one of the best descriptions of the default mode network I've heard given. I really want to thank you for that. And just on a human to human level, as everybody's listening, this is kind of the deeper unconscious, like some of the emotional patterns that we have set in. Sometimes we refer to like feeling almost as if we are self-sabotaging. I know better, but why can't I?
Right.
So when you
That's
hear
it.
us say default mode, oftentimes what this network also helps us to do is it really is kind of that unconscious autopilot, and it does remember the novel and the good, but it also has stored away some of the novel not so good, meaning like I've got to remember these things, like the things that the brain has marked as important, right? And sometimes important can mean that was really dangerous and we've got to be on high alert for that, and we don't want that to happen again. And so sometimes it's like, here's your base, like your floor, you might want a higher ceiling, but we're keeping you right here at the floor. And so it's, I love that you said there are certain things that can turn it off. But really, one of the biggest opportunities that I believe we have, and that I'm so excited to talk with you about this today, is when we really start to sit and consider what can be possible. What can be possible in expanding how long we live, how well we live? How can we take the information from centenarians? How can we apply it, not just apply, but integrate it, right? So, this is now why this default mode network becomes so important because it's not just a concept and I'm going to go do a new thing for a couple of days and see if I can muscle my way through it. It's how do I really change the operating system, if you will,
Very
of
much.
my
And this is
brain? And it's not just
how
about
it
turning it off. but it's about what we're putting in, right? So like
And
if we can start to press pause, so to speak, or turn it off, then what would we do to upgrade the programming?
right,
And
because
that's really where these principles are coming in that you have discovered. So, Dr. Martinez, kind of take us through this because, again, these four in these two categories, to me, they go in tandem. So, perception. Let's talk about the importance of perception across these four categories and how when we start to perceive things differently, how our brain and our neurochemistry begins to respond differently.
okay, but briefly, so we can see that for you were talking about why we know that it's not good for us and we do it. You have an intellect that says, "Oh, I'm not going to be an alcoholic like my parents," but your default mode is learning fatherhood means alcohol or whatever. So the default mode is learning. Not only that, but in longevity, it's learning. You're you're 10 and your grandmother is 60 and she looks like the 80s now, like she's 80. Okay, default mode goes 60. Context. Now, what happens when you get to 60? You look like your grandmother. You're programming or you're designing. We don't program, we're designing. And then first relationship, this happening in this relationship. Oh, that's not going to happen to me again. Default mode says context, habit, respond that way, even though your intellect says, no, no, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to be that way. I'm not going to sabotage myself. Boom, it happens. So you have to change that. Now, the perceptual that you were talking about, if you have the neuropsychological consequences for all four of them. So, for example, perception of time. The way you perceive time will affect pain, will affect your level of stress. Studies that will say to you, for example, one group, okay, we're going to shock you every 15 seconds for a minute. Another, we're going to shock you every 15 seconds for 5 minutes. The brain, the default mode, makes a time space projection, and then the people, and they stop at one to measure it, but they measure with biofeedback the nociceptors and all that. The people that thought that it was going to be 1 minute have less physical and subjective response to the pain than the people who thought that it was going to be 5 minutes. So the brain is constantly projecting time and space. How do centenarians look time and space? I have all the time in the world. What does that do? To a certain degree, it projects time and space into you being out there. An example, 102-year-old man. I always talk about this because it's amazing. A vegetable garden. I try to ask in an anthropological way. I don't say, how long do you have? I should say, hey, so what do you think of this thing? Where's this going? Normally we'll say, if I'm here next week, they'll say, look at it now, and I want you to look at it in 3 years to see how it's going to look. 102. It takes away the fear of dying. It takes away the not planning, and it projects out time and space where your biology to a certain degree follows, to a certain degree. Now, I asked one of them, all right, they all say they have all the time in the world. I said, okay, so what happens if you die tomorrow? He said, that's all the time in the world.
Oh,
You see?
wow.
That's the kind of thing that they have that we don't have. And those things can be learned at any age.
Wow, that really impacted me.
Yeah,
That's
right. Me
so
too.
simple and so profound,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm like that one got me deep. Well, and so the perception of time, when you and I had a conversation about 2 years ago. And I love this because, they said, hey, they think they're going to live forever, but they're not afraid to die today. And then there is exactly that. If they die today, then that's all the time in the world. It's so incredible. And I got to thinking about it. I mean, I just love this. To me, I broke it down, and you already said the word. What becomes so important is really looking and saying, how flexible am I? How flexible am I not only literally in my physical body, but in my mindscape, in my thinking? Am I really rigid? Am I really hard? Am I going to be like, an oak that's going to break? Or am I going to be like the willow tree? Can I bend? Can I extend? Because I love this idea of the extension of possibility, the extension of the perception, the reshaping of things, and just like really kind of opening that field of possibility. When I think of the missing link, I think that's really one of the things we know we have it, like I think innately we know as humans, like, oh yeah, more is possible. I've got potential, but yet none of us, not none of us. few of us live to our potential and greater, right? Many people are just surviving, getting by, and that's not a judgment. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's like we're not quite sure how to access more, right? How to access and expand this container. And to your point, these centenarians seem to have it. I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And to continue to get the most out of your own personal longevity adventure, be sure to go over to humanlongevity.com/podcast. You'll see our gift section. Now, inside of there, be sure to grab my favorite 7-day age reversal guide and mini course. humanlongevity.com/podcast. Now let's get back to today's episode. So there's the perception of time that's really important. And you gave a few others, the perception of health, right? The
Health,
perception of self-valuation. I really want to dive into
yeah,
that as well.
that self-valuation is really important because our cultures give us a double message.
Mhm.
Okay, with self-valuation, when you are told, I say, "Hey, I love your hair." Oh, that's because you haven't seen it in the morning. I love your hair gives you an option to be grateful. Oh, thank you very much. Gratitude brings oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, everything up. But if you say, "Oh, you haven't seen it in the morning," nothing happens. So that's an example. I asked a 103-year-old woman, I said, I may have told you this before, but I said, "You're really beautiful." And she said, "Oh, yeah, I've always been beautiful. Ever since I was a little girl, I was beautiful. And if you were younger, I'd be hitting on you."
You get all the ladies, Dr.
I get all the
Martinez.
ladies, yeah. So, but if I were younger,
Love that. If I were younger, I'd be hitting on you for
so
her.
gratitude and generosity are pro-social. They both have high oxytocin. Uh, Admiration and curiosity are out of self, and they both have dopamine and serotonin. Serotonin makes you feel confident.
Yeah.
So you have all those things, but you know what kills it? What kills it is if you have generosity and gratitude. What kills it is quid pro quo.
Mm.
If I say, "Let's go out to dinner," I'll pay this time, but you pay next time, and like keeping a ledger.
Balance sheet. Yeah.
And the research behind that in anthropology, okay, in Samoa and other areas in that area, South Pacific and so much, they give gifts to each other, but they're gifts to see who can best the other one. I'll give you one sheep, and you need to give me two. Sometimes they can't. They have high depression and high suicide rates because of that quid pro quo.
Wow. And I think there's a lot of that going on in society
Yeah,
today. I mean,
yeah.
especially the more we go down the road of just cognitive bias and dissonance, and it's in the way that we're served information on social media and all of it that just keeps reinforcing our biases. That's a really interesting. I'm kind of having the aha. It's not just the dopamine effect of what's happening when we're trying to get more and more and more. It's this thing of it's it's kind of like I got to one up. I got to one up. I got to get another like. I got to get another like. I got to get another comment. And so I can I can see how in our modern culture, even if we're not directly face to face with another human, just the way we engage on social media, in a multitude of ways can be really disconnecting us further and imbalancing our neurochemistry in such profound ways
The I
that,
self.
yep, yeah.
The I self is the one that goes out there, and the I self is not good for the immune system.
It,
So
it, and yeah, you're right. And I appreciate that what you're saying is like, there's this really beautiful dynamic that occurs when we are engaging with another human, right? So when we are giving, when we're in gratitude and we're in generosity, to give for the sake of giving, to allow ourselves to receive. There's so much incredible research just on the act of receiving. The appreciation of watching another receive can boost our dopamine, our
yeah,
oxytocin,
even
can lower our
vicariously. That's right.
cortisol.
Yeah, just watching it. But
Just
the other,
watching it.
for example, with
Hmm.
admiration, a lot of dopamine and oxytocin, because these are the dopamine is so that if it feels good, you want to replicate it. You want to be able to model that behavior. But what
Yeah.
kills it is envy. Envy will kill the all the positive effects. You have admiration, but yeah, no, of course, sure. And here's admiration with envy. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, he's got a lot of money, but his father got him set up, and that kills it. If you go,
Mm.
oh, I love truly, not just make it. I love that because I can learn something, or maybe I can be like this person. All the anti, all we're talking about here is anti-inflammatory and anti-stress. The two culprits that age. That's it.
Uh,
Of course, the
so,
environment.
okay. So in a minute, we're going to go to your travels around the world and what you've really learned of what you see and what you don't see. But I want to add something to this really quickly, if I may, that because I was just talking about gratitude in a master class I taught this week. And, we think that it's kind of like just being willing to say thank you. And that's a big part. Like just that step one is saying thank you. And I gave the example of, look, a coworker might come and say something really critical or really not so nice. And you might want to come back at them with a little agitation. But before you do, you just take a breath and go, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. Thank you for your perspective, right? And not that we necessarily always genuinely feel it. Getting comfortable with just saying thank you can be an inroad to gratitude, yet even more profound in the moments that we have with ourselves as we sit here and kind of go, well, how do I change it? How do I live longer? How do I improve my health? How do I improve my finances? How do I improve my relationships? Because it is easy to see where there is the gap, right? Where we are maybe not experiencing what we would hope or want or desire to. And then that kind of reinforces that lack or that contraction. Then we are actually compressing time. We're doing a lot of the things
They're
just,
interrelated in a positive or negative way, like you're saying. But for
yeah,
example, if you're uh, eh, try not to apologize. I'm not you, but I'm saying try not to everything. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Excuse me. If you let's say you're late
yeah,
and you get to the place and you say, "I'm so sorry because the traffic." You're there already, so you can say, "I appreciate you waiting for me. Thank you."
yeah,
That's it.
thank you.
No apologies. I
Uh,
appreciate you waiting for me. That's it. The apology doesn't mean anything. It's like you're sinning from the
right.
sin model.
Dr. Martinez, I think if everybody could just take this, if they took nothing else from this podcast away except for just you don't need to apologize for yourself anymore, folks. Like that idea that somehow you have done something wrong by not meeting some other person's expectations in and of that self, you're already putting yourself in a distress state. Again, just the hormones of stress. Like if we just take this down to one of the things that accelerates the rate and pace of biological aging, the faster we biologically age, the faster we break down, moving our system, organs, tissues into dysfunction and then to disease. So if we know that the faster we break down, the greater our chances of getting sick and checking out early and not having a good quality of life, then it becomes having real-time awareness of just saying, how am I feeling today? How am I enjoying, how am I experiencing my life? If it doesn't feel so good, if you're agitated, if you're worried, if you're overloaded, overwhelmed, those are bringing up the experience of stress and stress hormones and stress chemistry, which is very pro-inflammatory, which is going to break
Yes,
you down
very much.
faster.
And
So
I think, oh,
go ahead.
go. No, what you
No,
were
and
saying.
all I was going to say, Doc, is that just to point it, and then I'm going to toggle it back to you, is that when we elevate, gang, the hormones of stress, we're literally depressing. We're depressing our production of these, the hormones that are going to help us to experience greater happiness, joy, empathy, connection, love, fulfillment, meaning, all the good things that really come when we're in more of that, what we refer to as the parasympathetic state, where we make more oxytocin, where we will have more serotonin produced, we will have more dopamine. Those are your neurochemicals, your neurotransmitters. So it's the appreciation of this. And you just saying, hey, just say thank you, or I appreciate you. Like that in and of itself can give you a really simple tool to take yourself quickly out of those feelings of I've done something wrong and stress into gratitude, which we're hearing. We have we have biomarkers that are associated with slowing down that rate pace of aging.
Very much. And now that your audience knows a little about the default mode, we can go to default mode. And by the way, very few people see it this way. They see it just as the processing, but I see it much more than as a meaning maker, which it is. But
Yes.
see, your default mode learned not only from yourself, but 50,000 years epigenetically from Homo sapiens, we learned that when you say I'm sorry, you have to pay. There has to be a payment. So I'm sorry I'm late. It's already setting you up that you got to pay somewhere down the line. You pay. But if you say, let's say, let me give you a bad scenario here. Hey, you're 15 minutes late and the person is a little toxic and they say, oh, it's about time you got here. Thanks for noticing. And then I'm so grateful that you waited for me. Well, don't do it next time. Well, this time I'm very grateful. Next time we'll see what happens. You see, you don't buy into the toxicity. And this is not Pollyanna. This is longevity. That's very important. So remember, when you're doing something, be aware. Another one is, for example, you go to a restaurant or to anybody and say, oh, that was really very nice. I appreciate it. No problem. What the hell is this? No problem. Are you looking for a problem? Again, default mode problem means you have to have solutions and you have to have alarm, as opposed to you're welcome or thank you very much. I appreciate it so much. And everybody has the virus of no problem. Are you avoiding a problem? What is those are the things that the cultures will teach you to delay the gains that we can teach here on longevity. So you want to get no problem and you want to get rid of apologizing. And now if you did something wrong, that you did it wrong, you say, hey, look, this is what I did and I really regret that I did this. And I want to see how we can work this out so I can show you my gratitude. Different.
I love that. I'm just like, I love gratitude so much. And now I have an even deeper, I told you guys, every time I talk to this beautiful human, I'm always learning. And we've had similar, at times we talk about some of these same principles, but when we unpack it on different days through different lenses in just similar point, but even in a new context, it just gives so many ahas. So, wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Dr. Martinez. And you guys listening, please just go take the thank you challenge for a week. See how many times, anytime you catch yourself wanting to say, I'm sorry, even if you've heard yourself say it, like just kind of stop and reframe it. Thank you so much. Just thanks. Thanks for your
And
patience. Thanks for waiting.
if you say, I'm sorry, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I said, I'm sorry. What I meant to say, you can
That's
play.
right.
That's right. Another thing that they have a great sense of humor. They have a great sense of humor. This man who he was about 100, 101. I asked him because they're not Pollyanna that, oh, it's so wonderful that I'm blinded. No, they feel it. But I asked them, so what has been happening lately that's been a challenge to you anthropologically? I said, well, last year I lost my sight. I said, oh, how was that? How did you deal with it? Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. But let me tell you, resilience, the gain of that is every time I see a woman, I have to touch her to see who she is. And the women are just as chauvinistic. This is not a guy. The women will do the same thing. So that's how they deal with it. But first, they have to embody the pain rather than repressing it.
Embody it versus repress it. One of our mutual friends, Dr. Rimka, the other day, she said, you got to feel it to heal it. I'm like, hallelujah. I love you. Got to feel it to heal it. We don't want to repress it. I love that. Okay. So listen, you guys, coming up. Okay. A couple of fun things coming up. We're going to go over the 4 commandments of the centenarians, and we're going to talk about what Dr. Martinez has seen around the world, what's on point and what's missing, because we're going to continue to really dive into this missing link. There's more to come. Keep watching. Okay. That's just for a little edit point for myself for a commercial. Okay. So Dr. Martinez, we are back, and I really we were talking before the show started and you said, Melissa, I've been around the world. And so let's go to that part of the conversation. You have been to some of the top longevity centers, facilities, research, universities. You've met with some of the most brilliant minds across the planet, the longest lived humans. Tell me what we're already doing well that you see as like, this is really good. And where do you see the missed opportunity that you've kind of found this missing link because you're developing, you're bringing something to market that's going to kind of fill this need. So help us to understand what you have seen and how we can take what you've already told us about default mode and these, in time and perception and emotions and self-valuation and gratitude and curiosity. How does that start to fill this missing link?
Well, the first thing is that although I'm looking at the other side of microbiology, microbiology has given us a tremendous way of looking at how your biology is responding to the way you live. So microbiology is great. The problem is that on the other side, they're still using the old kinds of things of lifestyle. They're not looking at these things that I'm talking about. But what I was so excited about finding is that these people, these centenarians, and I've been to, they're not just the blue zones, Uruguay, Cuba, Montserrat. I try to go to beautiful places to find them. Sardinia, of
Smart.
course, the wine and the food. So they're all over the place. Okinawa, and so they're all over. And the United States has close to 100,000 centenarians now, and they're the fastest growing segment of the population, even though the lifespan is not. It's kind of going back a little bit, but centenarians are they're unique wherever they go. In Russia, the lifespan has dropped significantly. Centenarians are going up. Sardinia, everywhere. So they're doing something right. And the other beautiful thing that I found is that now that we look at the microbiology, there's something called inflammaging, which is what they see. Okay, as you're growing older, you're going to have a little bit more inflammation. Well, and why is it that once people get to about 105, which is semi super centenaries, why is it that they're not affected by these things and they don't have the diabetes and all these other things? What they have found is that there's a compensatory process going on when you get to around that age. And here's a study that showed it. Inflammaging, they looked at people that in their 30s, 40s, people that old, that maybe 90, and semi super centenaries. And it went like this: the young had less than the middle, and the centenarians had more. But why is it the centenarians don't get sick when they have more than the older or the younger adults? Well, they found that there's what they now we call compensatory. There's a ratio between a type of cell, T25 helper cell, and other cells, regulatory cells, and that kind of balance counteracts on the inflammation. It counteracts. So what did they find? The ratio of the T cell in the young was good. The ones in the middle was not so good, and the ones in the semi-supercentenarians were like the young people.
There it
So
is.
the older you get, the more compensatory. Not what we don't know, one of the things we want to check out is, are these people having some genetic process that comes out when they get to 105, or is it the way they live that it gets there when they get to 105? And I think it's the latter. I think it's how they live. We have
Yeah.
compensatory processing going on constantly. The longer you live healthy, the more compensatory process, because it's not as entropy.
100%. I mean, your immune system is on 24/7, gang, right? And what we know is that chronologically, as we do age, it already decreases functionality. And it's around in our mid to later 30s, that thymus gland, that's what's literally producing the majority of your, TH1, TH2, you're modulating
It's like
molecules, if you
kindergarten for T
will.
cells.
That's your, yes, exactly. That's going to initiate what happens in your immune function throughout your entire body. So as that starts to get smaller, we're not producing as much. We don't have as much modulating effect, meaning the immune system's be able to identify, go handle it, take care of it, come back and just rest. So the older we get chronologically, we start to see immune systems getting really kind of out of whack. There's higher incidences of autoimmunity. We see people getting just once they get sick. That's why even as we went through the pandemic, if you're over a certain age, you're at a greater risk. Why? Because the immune system doesn't respond and modulate as well historically as we're seeing in supercentenarians, but it's because we are living in quite overloaded, toxic, stressful environments that are constantly putting our immune systems under attack. And so it is very interesting that perhaps these individuals have had cleaner environments, cleaner experiences, right? Less demands on their system over time, and they're getting in right nutrients and things that are helping to and they might even be eating, maybe they're still eating, nose to tail, and they're getting the glands in because we can take glandulars. They might be getting thyroid glandulars in just if they're eating whole animals and things like that, that maybe we are not. That's helping
The way
that
to
as
look at
well.
it to give hope is that when something breaks, you know the immune system and the nervous and the endocrine system are going to have compensatory processes going on. So even
Yeah.
with the default mode, they have been looking now lately at the default mode of Centenarians, and they're finding that there's the anterior and the posterior part of the default mode, and they have different parts. What they're finding is that communication between the two begins to drop a little bit. But guess what happens? Communication between the within the anterior increases, compensating, compensatory, constantly.
Yeah. I love it. So, as you were telling me, and I just want to connect dots for our listeners. So, as you've gone to some of these incredible places around the world, and all these, you have identified. Look, the testing's down. Like we've got some incredible testing. There's ways that we can intricately measure rate and pace of biological aging. We can measure the overall, health and effectiveness of your immune system, your microbiology, your hormones, your neurotransmitters. We can look at a lot of really great biomarkers.
And
Yet
reverse them.
and reverse them, and yeah, as you were saying, but our main tools that we still have in the marketplace are some of the basic lifestyle, which, listen, gang, I always say you got to crawl before you can walk. So we must not bypass our movement and our sleep, and
No, no, of course. It's very
and
important.
our what we're putting into our body. That all does either help us, or it can create a greater load for the body to have to handle. So however, what you were sharing with me, Dr. Martinez, is most of these incredible places, they might be very luxurious and very high end and a very high price tag, but then what you leave with is still some of the same things you can go Dr. Google, right? Like you can go do Google and find out from Dr. Google, and you're kind of like, well, I already know that works. So do I need to spend
Yeah.
all this money on all these tests? Because I already know if I go move and I sleep and I get some
You don't have
sunlight
to
and I
take the
eat,
test.
like,
That's right. You just do those things. And but the whole
yeah,
point is that if we have something that is as sophisticated as that microbiology, which I
yep,
think that I have in not such a humble way, I'm saying it, so we can practice,
that's right.
then that's it. You got it. But the key though is that you have to allow yourself to understand that you have a hell of a lot more wisdom than you think you have
Hmm.
in your system. Whatever you inherited for the last 50,000 years is for the causes of health, but they need to be triggered. And longevity, I believe, is culturally learned, and the causes of health are inherited, but they need to be triggered.
Mm. And you have, so kind of that missing link with these 8 aspects. You have a piece of technology that's going to give us the consumer, the individual, a way to measure and improve and to measure self, like subjectively and objectively, our meaning maker, right? Kind of the perceptions, the emotion, these states, and then we're able to actually quantify it objectively with against these biomarkers, correct? Can you tell us a little bit more
That's
about
right.
that?
Yeah, because for example, once you take that test
Mhm.
and you get your biomarkers, whatever they're going to be, there are many different kinds of biomarkers. Okay, you get your biomarkers, then we find correlations. And we see there's a correlation here between a biomarker of inflammation and one of the
Mhm.
factors being a little low.
Mhm.
Then we have specific clinical interventions that are not supplements or anything, clinical neuropsychological interventions that you can do to change that in addition to supplements and all these other things. Because, for example, with the biomarkers, for example, glycan and others will tell you you have a tendency to not absorb vitamin D very well or B12. Well, then you know that supplements or the food would be good. That's okay. But what it'll tell you is that if we do an intervention for one of these factors in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, because the
Yeah.
default mode takes about 6 to 8 weeks or more to change, we'll do another pre-test or pre and post-test, and we'll be able to tell you what your biological age is. If it was 30 years older, it could be now 10 years older, or it could be 10 years younger. So there's data there with the last of what we know, the most important things that we know are there. So it's very, very encouraging what we're seeing. Very encouraging.
Okay, so based around your 4 commandments here in the mind body code, or commitment, I said commandments because I kind of feel like it is, right?
That's very
It
nice. Thank you.
Yeah, like we're going with the commandments. That's right. Growing older is the passing of time. Aging is what we do with time based on our cultural beliefs. Now, what you said around perception was that there's 4 markers. There's time, our perception of time, our perception of age, our perception of health, and our perception of self-valuation. So let's take a moment, and this is right here. Age is what we do with time based on our cultural belief. So if I wanted to positively shift my neurobiology to extend my longevity potential by way of this perception of aging marker, and how would you, what little insight from a centenarian, or from your practices, what what insight would you give me to work on
Okay.
improving that?
Maybe we can go deep with one of them, and the next time we can get another one because they're so. Well, let's go deep with time. That's the one you wanted to use, right? Time, or which one?
Actually, well, it was perception of aging.
Oh,
Perception of
aging.
aging.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, aging. All right. First, aging. Let's go to default mode first.
Okay.
The cultural portals that I call them. Cultures will set portals for you and will say, this is the newborn, this is the infant, this is the child, this is the adolescent, this is middle age, and this is old age. Each one of them has a speed and has a way of aging and a way of dressing and a way of getting sick that you learn. So 45, let's say 45 is middle age, depending on where you are. If you're in Australia, it's 70. If you go to Turkey, it's 45. So, but the other thing, I asked a centenarian, what is middle age? He said, that's a dumb question. You find out when you die. So, so without knowing it, the culture is colluding to keep you within those places. So you reach middle age, 45. The day before, you're not 45. You're almost 45. You're not middle age. When you get to middle age, you have the badge of middle age. You have to dress middle age, look middle age, plan middle age, and then your biology will adjust to that because your biology. And if you fight it, you go, I was thinking about going back to school. Wait a minute, you need to be thinking about your retirement. What do you mean about school? That's kind of irresponsible. And why are you dressing like this? You want to look like a teenager? By the way, this is a Hollister that only teenagers wear. And
Right.
somebody did ask me, do you want to look at teenagers? No, I want teenagers to look like me. So you have to. That's very important. The other thing with the aging is that if you see the passing of time as growing older, that's it. You grow older with the passing of time. So then, if you see that aging is what you do with that time based on your culture, what you learned as someone when you were 10 looked at 60. Studies will very simple. We'll say to kids, what does a 50-year-old look like? And they go, hey, I want you to give me some water. A 50-year-old, what do you think that child is going to look like when they're 50? It's already programmed or designed to be that way. So, and you look around and you see people that they don't look that great. I mean, you want to check it out. Go to the 40s, go to the 1940s, and look at people who were 30 and they look like they're 50 or 60 and 70. So
Yeah.
those are the ways. Then the other thing that can be done is that with aging, you can begin to look at your language. You have to clean up your language.
Yeah.
The best anthropological work that I do is in the men's gym. Let me clarify that really quickly, because they talk and you go into the lockers and they say, "How are you doing?" Well, I can't complain for my age. Right there, a marker.
Right. Right.
Uh, how are you doing today? It okay, but it's a morning. Or you go to the doctor, see the cluster of the, and you say, "Doctor, what do you think about? What do you want for your age?" And I told you before, but it's good for your audience to hear this. A friend of mine who's close to 80, he went to the doctor and he said, he's a physician himself. And he said, look, my right knee is hurting. And the doctor says, well, what do you want for your age? He says, the same thing that my left knee has, which is 80 and it's not hurting. So that's the kind of thing that you have to be a rebel against the
Mm.
system. One centenarian, I asked him, he said he had a terminal illness. And he said he went to a doctor and the doctor said, you look, 10% of the people only make it. He said, great. And I'm going home and celebrate. What? That I'm that 10%. And then later I asked him, so what did the doctor have to say? He said, I don't know. He's dead. When did this happen? 10 years ago. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do that, but I'm suggesting that you
Right.
you become a rebel and you always take
So,
responsibility.
Okay, so you take responsibility, you become a rebel. So A, it's like the awareness of our language. Like what are we already potentially, where are we potentially unconsciously reinforcing those cultural portals that have already been set up for us? Okay,
Right.
so 45 is middle age. Oh, I'm doing okay for my age. Oh, I'm just getting older. It's like no, those things that we say. Step one, be aware. So your brain, you can start to actually catch yourself saying those things. So let me ask you, Dr. Mario, all of a sudden I'm like, not that I would say this, but let's pretend I'm like, I'm doing okay for my age. I hear myself say that. What would you suggest I do to immediately reframe and start to retrain so I can improve my perception of aging?
Okay. Well, the first thing is to not to give people any advice, but get them to reflect. You said that for your age. How does your age feel? Do you feel younger or older than you were? So, a
Yes.
Socratic question. And then when they tell you this and this and that, well, I'll tell you something. I have some information here that you might like, that the way you perceive yourself and the language that you use has a psychoneurological value that will age you faster or slower. So do you think you might want to try that? Questions always. Uh,
So thank you. And how do I question myself? So again, I hear myself say like, oh, it's just like, oh, I'm getting older. Oh, it's my age. How do I help my own default mode? How do I help my own inner dialogue start to shift that in a more real-time way? Like what
okay.
questions might I
Yeah,
ask
specific.
myself?
Here's a technique. First is to be aware that you're doing it, as we talked about, and say, okay, look, you when you think about for my age, who do you think about in your family? And you might say my uncle or this or that. This is something that you learned. How about if we give it another interpretation, but we need evidence? The brain needs evidence, not affirmations. From
Correct.
now on, how old do you think you are? I think I'm 40. And how old are you? 30. Okay, not going to work. What you do, and we show a technique and a kind of contemplative, go back to when you were 30, put a photo in your phone when you were 30, look at it, allow yourself to perceive it, own it, and then act as if you're 30 for the next week
Mhm.
before it begins to change because it needs evidence.
Well, I love that you just said that. So, of course, I'm a big fan of Ellen Langer's work, and of course, you and she work closely together and have at different times. And that's straight out of the counterclockwise study that she did and made so famous back in the late 70s, early 80s. And so, what I've done, and I'll let you guys know, I didn't even know Dr. Martinez was going to say that. I always forget that I have this. I did a 7-day age reversal using this very concept. So, if this is something you want to go improve, just go over to humanlongevity.institute.com and there is a free 7-day age reversal challenge. So I literally give you a little video masterclass. There's a guide that's going to take you through it. And it's just a very fun, simple daily practice that you're going to do with this exact concept of kind of taking a picture of a younger you. And it's not just seeing it, but it's the emotion behind it. So we guide you into that. Go grab that free download if you guys want that over at humanlongevity.institute.com. And so, okay, Dr. Martinez, we've only got a few minutes left. I could talk to you forever and ever and ever. And I want to give everybody some great takeaways because, gang, the missing link is truly what is happening in the meaning that we're giving our life. So, how are we perceiving our time? How are we perceiving aging? How are we perceiving our health? Do you think that you're sick? Do you think that you're well? How are you perceiving that self valuation? Are you doing it for the sake of doing it, or does there have to be a payoff in it? Again, Ellen Langer, I love. Well, I won't say it was Ellen, but she's Ali Crum was doing this study with under her, and it
Yeah.
was the maiden, the work chamber maid. What do they call them? Basically, room service. The folks that
Oh,
work in
yeah.
hotels in
That's
New York
pretty
City, right?
impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a great study. And here's the real crux of it, you guys, that it was so, house cleaners they're doing heavy lifting every day. There's a very physical job. They're lifting beds, sheets, vacuuming, they're doing all the thing. And so
And the
they had
stretching.
the stretching. They are highly mobile, right? They're doing so much activity. If you were to put a step tracker on them, they've definitely exceeded 10,000 steps a day. But at the time, we weren't tracking steps. At the time of this study, what they did is they basically told one group, hey, like, here's exercise is good for you in this way. They just kind of went over some facts about the benefits of exercise. In the other group, they said, hey, here's the benefits of exercise, and did you know that your job meets this and this benefit, like all these benefits you're getting from all these activities you're doing, meaning they now had a new meaning, they had a new perception of themselves in what they were doing through their day. It was what, 6, 8 weeks later, they went ahead and they looked back, and every single one of those people in the group that all of a sudden knew that their work was exercise, they had lost weight, they had lowered their blood pressure, they lowered their blood sugar, they improved their A1C. I mean, their markers were astounding of how their body
Self-esteem went up.
composition changed.
Yeah.
And they did nothing else. They didn't change their diet. They didn't change their sleep. They didn't change medications or supplements or anything. They just changed their perception. So the power of your perception is massively, massively important in how the brain, the psychology is informing the physiology. And in the second category that you gave us, Doc, all around emotions. Again, he talked to us today. I took notes on admiration, curiosity, generosity, and gratitude. So let me ask you this. What is your favorite way to approach curiosity? Like if you had to, it seems kind of obvious, but what's your way of helping people to play with curiosity in their life?
Well, I'll give you something that you can use with the default mode too. When you wake up, you'll know what your default mode is doing. When just before you go to sleep, start um, reflecting and see what comes out. And just when you wake up, reflecting and see what comes out. And you're going to find this and that, but after a while, you're going to find a pattern. Who's going to upset me today? What kind of challenge do I have today? Those are the default modes. At that moment, you stop. You're in your bedroom and you look around your bedroom and say, oh, there's a spider on the wall. Immediately, mindfulness. Oh, I've never noticed it. You 3 or 4 times to shift. And then you go, what am I going to find today that I have never seen before? Today is Monday. My usual Monday, I want to know what new things I'm going to learn about. So you're setting up a challenge. What am I going to be curious about today? And be aware of it. And you'll find that it completely changes your Monday, which is a cultural name of time and space.
I love
That's
that.
simple. And these
It's
things are so simple that they're deceptively simple, but you're doing some incredible neuropsychology when you do these things.
100%. And you're priming your brain, gang. You're in essence helping your brain to know what you want to see, what you want to look towards, what you want to experience. And it's deeply rooted in the neuroscience. We could sit here and quote studies all day, but it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So please do not dismiss what is seemingly so simple, because these are proven, clinically proven processes that will add years to your life and life to your years. And so Dr. Martinez is, what's so exciting about this is he's taken these 8 principles that he shared with us today, and they literally now have it set up in a clinical manner where there's assessment. It's going into an app process, so that it can be measured and managed again against your biological age and some of the different biomarkers that are out there. So we have new processes that are coming forward in the work that he's bringing out, to all of us, so that we can continue to reimagine our own possibilities. And just because culture has set up these portals, just because things used to be a certain way, well, you used to be 3, but you're no longer 3 today. You are always at choice to create an upgraded belief, an upgraded perception, an upgraded experience. But what you've really highlighted today for us, Dr. Martinez, that I think is so beautiful is that it really begins with questions. You can radically transform your health, your longevity, your life, your quality of your relationships, any aspect of your personal human experience by the quality of the questions that you ask, because the quality of your questions give meaning to your very life experience. Dr. Martinez, you are amazing. And I'm so honored. You guys, he's on our scientific advisory board at the Human Longevity Institute. We're going to be bringing some retreats out in 2024, so get ready for those.
Great
But
stuff.
as we wrap up today, my dear friend, what, if anything else, do you have? Did we miss anything that you feel is really important, or any final thoughts that you want to leave everybody with in in knowing what is possible to live their longest life well.
A couple of things. I want to plug something.
Yes.
Ellen Langer's new book, The
Ooh,
Mindful Body, and the subtitle tells you everything. How to think your way to chronic health. I would recommend strongly that you get that book. It's already number one, and it came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. Outstanding book. Outstanding. She sent me the manuscript a few months ago, and it's the best she's ever done. Just amazing, amazing work.
I can't
And the
wait.
second one is that what you were talking about, the study that she did. Two things: attribution, the cost that you give to something will have a biological effect. And the study that she did with those men that changed their age in 6 7 days, what
Yep.
happened is that they lost it every 6 months because they were put back into the portal. They came back and they would say, "Grandpa, can I get you some coffee? I'll get it myself." No, no, I'll get it for you. Finally, they acquiesced and they went back to their old age. So you want to be able to change what the co-authors, your cultural co-authors, are doing when you change yourself. If not, you fall right back into the old thing. She does it differently now, of course, but that was one of the things that that happens. So you got to be real careful with what you and if you're making some changes, keep them to yourself because the emotional vampires are not going to like it, and
Yeah.
people don't like to change with you. They want to change by watching what you do. So don't try to change anybody. Just change yourself.
Yes, that's the best recommendation. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for all of your work that you have brought forth and will continue to. You are a true leader in this longevity space, and it
Thank
has
you.
been an honor as always, my friend.
Pleasure and congratulations for the work you do. She's outstanding. I want you to know that. You already know
Yes,
it. All
yes, I
right.
am. Thank you. See, I'm learning,
Good.
you guys. I'm learning.
You
I
notice how
got
it's
my
a little
Centenarian
difficult? It's a
mind.
little difficult to do it. To say, oh no,
Woo!
no.
I know we got to work those muscles. It's great, though. I love it.
Okay, well, thank you. My
Yes, thank
pleasure.
you. And to each and every one of you, thanks again for tuning in. Remember, there's so many phenomenal free resources over at humanlongevity.institute.com. We want to give a big thanks to all of our special sponsors today. Go over and see all the goodies they have there for you as a part of our way of saying thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to get that 7-day age reversal. Until next time, continue to go out and reimagine what is possible for you to thrive by design at any age and any stage of life. Take care.